I am Bob Copperstone, a former newspaper journalist, and I like to write stories that mostly deal with my childhood in the mid-20th century. During my 80-plus years, I have accumulated troves of facts and memories as I experienced them here in Wahoo and surrounding Saunders County. These vignettes are presented as true and factual to the best of my recollection, and I wish to pass them on before they blink, flicker, and go dark forever. This is Growing Up Wigwam, as told by Uncle Bob. The railroad viaduct. A wonderfully quaint wooden viaduct once spanned Wahoo's 2nd Street between Chestnut and Broadway. It was a formidable 3-stage bridge with an approach, level top, and descent. It carried traffic over a small ravine, while the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad freight trains passed underneath. The viaduct, as we kids pronounced it, played an important role in my childhood adventures. It served as a destination for a brisk hike going south. A longer railroad hike going north in the opposite direction led to First Bridge, Second Bridge, etc., until it reached the bottom of Bodley's Hill, named after a local family, at about Fifth Bridge, a mile or so out of town. My home was down the tracks on 9th Street. When I dared to, I ventured to the viaduct. It took a certain amount of courage because the viaduct often sheltered hobos, or tramps, or, rudely, bums. There were usually fresh campfire ashes under the structure. And sometimes there were local boys who would prowl atop the viaduct, looking to moisten intruders below who strayed within range of their warm yellow streams. Although the viaduct appeared fortress strong, with huge timbers and thick planks, I was skeptical of its soundness when I heard the lumber groan and tremble when cars labored over and under. Larger trucks didn't use the structure, avoiding high centering. One time I climbed under the bridge, almost to the crest of the ravine, tucking myself under the timbers. I could actually watch the cars rumble noisily directly overhead through large gaps in the planks. I panicked, afraid they'd fall through the trembling structure and crush me. I scrambled down and never did that again. My fondest memory of the viaduct was exciting as a carnival ride. It involved a rickety old family car on the last legs and my father, Hank Copperstone, who delighted in making children laugh with glee. We'd pile into that old crate, which Dad kept barely working order, using baling wire and high hopes. That was just before we got our used 1939 Plymouth sedan, a luxury limo by comparison. Dad would drive the car full of kids around the city, with a high point adventure being an airplane ride over the viaduct. We stopped in the middle of 2nd Street just off Broadway. The car aimed west toward the viaduct. We kids quivered in suspense. Hank stomped on the clutch, slammed into low gear, and revved the engine again and again. Hunched over the steering wheel with a wicked grin, Dad yelled, "Are you ready to fly, kids? Who wants to fly?" We knew what was coming. We grabbed the upholstery, seat backs, door handles, each other, or any other anchor we could find. Without waiting for an answer, Hank popped the clutch, and the elderly machine got up ahead of speed, the front wheels hitting the first plank solidly and bouncing the screaming children off their feet and seats. The rear wheels left the ground and landed with a thump, sending the kids airborne again. Climbing the east side at high speed, the front end aimed for the sky as they reached the flat top level. Altitude attained. We were flying. The front end slapped the top level hard. That's when we heard and felt clattering and scraping noises from under the car. We didn't know what happened until we stopped at the bottom and saw that part of the exhaust system had busted loose. Now the ride slammed down the descending slope. The bucking and slamming continued until we hit pavement again. There was a slight dip where the lumber met the street, and we got a final set of bounces. The ride was over. The children were dog-tired, weak from screaming and laughing. The car had had it, too. Hank climbed back up the viaduct to retrieve the muffler and assorted parts and threw them into the trunk. The ride home was nowhere near as exciting. The next day, Dad got out the baling wire to get the old crate ready for the next airplane ride. Today, the viaduct and tracks are gone, and the ravine it spanned has been filled to street level. Saunders County, which owned and maintained the structure, tried to save it after the rails were torn up, but sadly it was declared deteriorated and too expensive to repair. The ravine is now filled to street level, and 2nd Street is paved straight through from Broadway to Chestnut. Where the railroad tracks used to be, a strip of land cutting through the city. That land is now largely unfinished Maple Street right-of-way, and further north it is part of the hiking and biking trail leading to Lake Wahoo. On a personal note, today I live in a little white house just a few yards southeast from where Dad and I, my sisters Rochelle and Janie, and carloads of kids used to go flying. Sometimes on a quiet summer night, I can step outside my house, and if I listen carefully over croaking frogs and chirping crickets, I can almost hear the echoes of children's mock terror screams and their beautiful laughter. The following is a Bob Smith's lightly edited account of the same battered viaduct and the same thrill-seeking adventures that linger in our memories. In the 1950s, well before cell phones, computers, and before many homes had a TV, teenagers loved to joyride and exercise the freedoms that their fresh driver's license promised. The more friends they could stuff into their cars, the better. Often they would challenge the viaduct for the thrill of getting front wheels airborne over the center of the span. One night, probably in 1954, that is Bob, who was talking now, was cruising in a friend's car with 2 other guys and 3 girls when we decided to challenge the viaduct. We made 2 passes over the span with increasingly jolting results. A 3rd run, fated to be the last, aimed the car east. At first, the driver had kept it safely to the right on the 2-lane viaduct. On the 3rd pass, he edged down closer to the center, gunning it even faster. To our horror, we saw the headlight beams of another car on the viaduct coming toward us in the opposite lane. Our car sideswiped it, then careened leftwards at the bottom of the viaduct, slamming headfirst into a tree on the north side of the street. The impact jolted the horn and suddenly blared non-stop into the quiet night. The commotion woke the neighbors, and house and porch lights began to snap on. Somebody called the police. No one was injured, and no one had witnessed the incident except the 6 in the car and the other driver. Meanwhile, the 3 girls had fled the night, leaving the boys to explain themselves when the police arrived. I don't remember if any citations were issued. Both cars were driven away. Bob Smith and his wife, Jody, live in Omaha. He is a 1955 graduate of Wahoo High School. To To this day, Bob always stays carefully in his own lane while driving across bridges and viaducts. To be continued.
Growing Up a Wigwam is written by Bob Copperstone and produced by Chris Beatty. Everything is recorded in lovely Wahoo, Nebraska.
If you've enjoyed this and want some more stories about Uncle Bob and other things, please subscribe at chrisbeatty.com.